Well, hello there, welcome back to another video. My name is Alex and welcome to my photography channel. This is going to be video number 1 of this free beginner to advanced photography course that I want to create for you guys. So this is a series of videos that I am creating in order to share with you everything that I've learned about photography over the last 10 years. This is gonna be an absolutely free course, so I'm not gonna ask you for any money. I'm not gonna lock this course after a certain amount of videos. My intention with this is to honestly be able to take someone from not knowing anything about photography all the way to working with their first paying client. So given that I wanna create this course in a specific order, this is going to be video number 1, and in this video I'm going to assume that you don't know anything about photography. So this video is going to be geared towards helping you choose the right niche or the right photography category that you might be considering getting into. So with that being said, in this video we will be talking about the pros and cons about different photography categories, as well as the estimated original investment that you should expect to make as far as equipment. And we will also talk about the pricing ranges of how much you should expect to charge for these specific photography services. Now, one thing that I want you to keep in mind is that these price ranges can vary depending on your location, depending on the country that you're from. So what I share with you here in this video as far as pricing is mainly based on my personal experience and what I have seen around the area here where I live. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about before we actually get into talking about the different niches is that I do realize that there are many more niches out there than the ones that we're going to talk about in this video. In this video, I am mainly going to focus on the most popular ones, but if you want to know a little bit more about any of the other ones out there, what I have decided to do is that I have created a free PDF. So if you want to get access to this PDF, I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video. If you click on that link, it's going to take you to a landing page. It's going to ask you to put an email address, and as soon as you put that email address, the PDF will be sent to your email. Another thing, if you do sign up to receive this PDF, you will also be signing up to my email list, which will mean that you will continue to receive emails from me. And the way that I want to use this email list is to be able to share with you further photography advice. I want to be able to share with you the different products that I use, the different products that I find, that I recommend, that I am personally thinking of purchasing in the future. I will also be sharing with you lots of free information, maybe more videos like this that I will not be posting here on YouTube, as well as free presets once we get to the post-processing section of this course. And at the end of the day, my goal is to share with you as much value as I can. I want to be able to help you to be able to make money with your photography, or at the very least get to a point where you feel comfortable with the camera on your hands. Now, keep in mind that there's no obligation to sign up to receive my free PDF or even sign up to my email list. If you enjoy these videos, if you believe that I am supplying enough value for you, then a simple like on these videos and maybe a subscription to my channel will be more than enough. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the main topic of this video, which is how to choose the right niche. Now, to give you a brief explanation of what a niche is basically a category, and there are many different categories in photography. You can go anywhere from wedding photography all the way to doing macro photography, landscape photography. So there's many different opportunities of photography, especially if you're starting out, for you to get into. Now, in this video, we're going to mainly focus on the most popular ones, but if you want to learn about the other ones, then you will have access to them on the PDF. So to get started with the first one, and the way that I will talk about these different niches or different categories will be that I will start to explain who I believe these categories are more suitable for based on personality types, and then we're going to jump into the pros, and then we're going to talk about the cons, and then we're going to talk about the original expected investment in equipment that you should expect to make if you decide to pursue this photography category. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the different pricing range of how much you should expect to charge your clients if you get to a point where you are proficient enough to work with paying clients in these specific categories. So to get started with the first one, and this is one of the most popular ones out there, and that would be wedding photography. In my opinion, wedding photography, it's mostly for those of you who might have a more outgoing personality. Those of you who are not afraid to strike a conversation with people who you might not know very well, or maybe you might not know at all. You know, there are people out there who tend to be very quiet, and being in a situation like that may make them feel uncomfortable. So if you have an outgoing personality, if you love to direct people, so if you don't mind to be kind of loud, because wedding receptions tend to be kind of loud sometimes, then this is a good category for you to get into. Now, to talk about the pros of wedding photography, and the main one will be the money. There is quite a bit of money to be made in wedding photography, especially if you happen to make a good name for yourself in the wedding photography industry. So I believe that this is one of the main reasons why so many photographers decide to get into wedding photography. Another pro is that you will get to get exposure. You will get to put yourself in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people in a specific day, and they will see you work. They will see the way you handle yourself. They will see the way that you talk to your subjects. These people will see you walking around the venue with your camera and just being a professional. And when they see this and they like the way you behave, they like the way you handle yourself in specific situations within the wedding day, they will start to consider you to be the photographer for their own wedding or the photographer for their own event. And this is how you can start to get more exposure by doing wedding photography. Another pro of getting into wedding photography is that there tends to be quite a bit of demand for wedding photographers. Every year there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who end up getting married. So if you live in an area that is fairly populated, I am more than sure that you know someone who will be getting married in a certain year. So as you can see, there's always demand for wedding photographers because there's always people getting married. So if you happen to make a good name for yourself in this industry, you will never suffer from any lack of work. So that is another big pro of getting into wedding photography. But before you get there, you gotta make sure that you feel comfortable working in this specific wedding environments, and that you are confident that you can deliver the work that is expected of you. Another good thing about getting into wedding photography is that you will be able to build a good portfolio. On average, a photographer takes between 250 to 700 images on a wedding day. And as your portfolio grows, as you have more evidence of your work, then you will feel more confident in showing potential future clients this work, and therefore you will end up getting more photography work from these clients. So it is an amazing opportunity for you to build a good portfolio. And the last pro that I have for wedding photography is that you will also be part of this very special day for the people getting married. You know, these people, this couple, are more than likely going to see these images 5 years, 10 years, 20 years into the future. They're going to show these images to their kids. They're going to show these images potentially even to their grandkids. And the fact that you were part of this, then it could be very special for you as a photographer. So that is another pro of getting into wedding photography. Now, as we all know, nothing is perfect in life. So as there are pros, there's also cons to getting into wedding photography. The first one, just like I spoke about it earlier, you need to have an outgoing personality. So wedding photography is not for every photographer out there. The next con is that wedding photography tends to be seasonal work. I know for my area here, wedding season tends to be from the end of April all the way to the end of September. So it is seasonal work, and you might be without work or without a lot of work for the rest of the year. So you have to know that ahead of time, and you have to prepare for the slow months ahead of time. So that is something that might not be convenient for people out there who need consistent income throughout the year. Another con of wedding photography is that despite that you can actually make good money doing it, it also tends to be fairly stressful during the wedding day. As a wedding photographer, you will be expected to be there during those important events that happen in a wedding day. There are some things that you absolutely cannot miss, such as the first look. If the bride is going to have a first look with her dad, her mom, her future husband, you cannot miss her walking down the aisle. So for example, if the bride is walking down the aisle and you're not positioned where you need to be positioned, these situations can turn out to be extremely stressful. And one thing with wedding photography is that given that this is such a special and delicate day, one mistake could literally ruin your reputation for the rest of your life. Especially now with social media, if you don't capture a special moment that the couple is expected to be captured, that should be enough to make these clients upset, to make these clients, start talking to their friends and family and letting them know that you as a photographer failed to do their job. So make sure that before you get into wedding photography, you know what you're doing, you are comfortable with your camera, you are comfortable in changing settings in your camera, and know what type of images you will get by changing these settings on the spot. Another con of wedding photography is that sometimes you will be required to work for long hours. I know that on average, typical wedding day can range anywhere from 4 to 10 hours. So depending on the package that the couple chooses from you as a photographer, then you might need to be present at the wedding day for 4 to 10 hours. So this will indicate that you will need to be physically capable in order to work for long periods of time without taking a break. You will also need to be able to move in a fast-paced environment, because you might be taking pictures on one side of the venue and then they might need you on the other side, and you sometimes might need to be able to even run. So you must be aware that wedding days can be hectic, wedding days can be fairly stressful, and you will need to be able to move fast in order to be able to deliver the type of work that they expect from you as a photographer. You will also need to be able to kneel down or stand for long periods of time, especially during the ceremony. So those are all the things that you need to take into consideration before you decide to become a wedding photographer. Now, the last con that I can think of when it comes to wedding photography is that you will sometimes have variations of light. So you will either A, have to be able to know where to pose your subjects, or B, you have to know how to use off-camera and on-camera flash. So for some people, that can mean a steep learning curve. So they might not either have the time or the energy to learn that, and that could really limit you in a wedding environment. I know that some venues, they have really terrible light, and there's no way that you will get good images despite of having the best camera out there without having external source of lighting. So that's another thing that you need to get into consideration. The equipment that you need might be a little bit more pricier than the other categories of photography out there. So if you're working on a limited budget, then wedding photography might not be for you yet. Talking about equipment, you should expect to make an original investment in your wedding photography equipment of about $2,500 to maybe $6,000 to $7,000. Now, again, I just want to remind you, this is based on what I've seen and based on my personal experience. So for you, it might be a completely different amount. It could be way less or it could be way more. But I personally want to be able to have coverage for everything that I need on a wedding day, especially if you're charging good money for it. So I wouldn't start with anything less than $2,500 as far as equipment. With that money, you can buy yourself a full frame camera, which is the type of camera that I recommend for wedding photography. And maybe you can buy yourself 2 fast prime lenses that you can use in order to give you those professional looking images. So that is all as far as investment in your equipment. What you should expect to charge for an average wedding day. If you are a beginner in wedding photography, but you feel like you're capable of delivering professional work, then I will start out at about $1,900. And despite that this might sound like a lot of money for some people, believe it or not, this is in the low end of how much you can charge for a full day coverage on a wedding. When you create a package for wedding days, you don't only charge for the time that you will be there, you will charge for any potential liabilities that you may encounter. You know, the equipment that we use is not cheap equipment. So if you happen to drop a camera, if you happen to break a lens, sometimes, you know, those lenses cost more than what you could be charging for a full day coverage on a wedding. And at the end of the day, you might end up losing money rather than making money. So you have to take into account all those liabilities, as well as the time that you will invest, not only during the wedding day, but also when you go back to your office and edit all those hundreds or sometimes even thousands of images. So that is why I believe that $1,900 will be a fair price to charge as a beginner. But once you gain more experience and once you get to a level where you feel extremely comfortable working with different weddings and different couples, and you know that the work you deliver is quality work, then your price could be in the 3,000s, 4,000s, 7,000s, even 10,000s. At the end of the day, you set your own pricing, and if the client is willing to pay it, then more power to you. So that's it for wedding photography. The next niche that I want to talk about will be portrait photography. Now, Portrait photography tends to be a lot easier than wedding photography because you will not be dealing with sometimes hundreds of different people that you will need to photograph. Portrait photography can be photographing one individual person, or maybe photographing a group of people, typically less than 10, less than 5 people. So it is a lot easier to do. For portrait photography, you will still need to have a direct interaction with people. So you will still need to be able to strike a social conversation without being awkward, without making your subjects feel uncomfortable. So you will need to still be able to be somewhat social, but you won't have to be as social as someone who focuses mainly on shooting weddings. So some of the pros of portrait photography is that this type of photography tends to have a low barrier of entry. You don't really need expensive equipment to get quality work when it comes to shooting portraits. It is also easy to build a portfolio because you can literally, if you have the demand and the market is there, you can literally do 5 or 6 different portrait sessions in a day, and you can build a portfolio with different clients and different locations. So in that way, it's easy to build a portfolio with portrait photography. Another thing that you get with portrait photography is flexibility. You will be able to work with the client to choose the location that you as a photographer believes will get you the better results. So for that reason, you will be able to create a diverse portfolio with different backgrounds, different sceneries, and it can help you diversify your portfolio and the cultures and the people that you work with, which at the end of the day also helps you to create personal connections with people with multiple backgrounds, and you will also be able to express your creativity a lot better than you might be able to, for example, during a wedding day, where you're limited to the specific nearby environment of where you'll be doing your shoots. So those are some of the pros of portrait photography. The cons are that you will still be dealing with people, and sometimes people can be difficult. I know that for myself, I've had clients before that either cancel last minute or they show up late to the photo shoot. And sometimes when you're doing portraits and you're doing multiple families one after the other, you know, lost time is not time that you can recoup, because a client showing up late will mean that you either have to cut their session short or that you will have to move up the following client 20, sometimes even 30 minutes because the previous client was late. So it does have those sort of difficulties sometimes when you have to be dealing with people. Another thing that you have to take into consideration is that sometimes, especially when you do family portraits, you will have to be dealing with kids, and kids are not the best at listening. So if you don't have patience working with kids, then maybe portrait photography, especially family, is not the right type of photography for you to get into. Another con that you might run into when it comes to portrait photography is that because the barrier of entry is so low, I mean, you can literally do portraits with a new phone nowadays. There's gonna be a lot of competition out there. So you have to really stand out with your work in order to be able to make a name for yourself and become recognized as the portrait photographer in your area. So that's another thing that you gotta keep into consideration, aside from also having great communication skills. You need to be able to make the client feel comfortable with you. You need to be able to know how to pose. You need to be able to effectively and clearly give directions to your clients. So this is something that you will also get better with experience, but it is always good to have that type of personality to be able to have that clear conversation even when you are just getting started. Now, to get into the equipment costs, to get into portrait photography, I say a realistic range will be between $400 to $800, and this should give you enough money to buy used equipment if you're really on a tight budget. But you can buy maybe a DSLR, which I no longer recommend because there's a lot better cameras out there nowadays. But you can buy a DSLR, and you can buy a prime 1.8 lens, and that should be enough for you to get started with your portrait photography journey. And now, as far as earnings, you can expect to charge between $290 all the way to maybe $600 an hour. But again, it will all depend on your experience and the type of clients that you choose to work with. So those are the pros and cons for portrait photography. I hope that I have been clear enough in explaining the pros and cons, as well as the investment that you might be required to make, and the pricing ranges that you should expect to charge. If you have any more questions about this, feel free to leave those questions in the comment section of this video, and I will make sure to either answer them on the next video, or if you join my email list, I can reply to you directly through there. Now moving on to niche number 3, or category number 3, and that would be sports photography. Now this photography is typically for people who tend to be more quiet and reserved, because you don't really need to be socializing with people. You don't really need to talk to people. You know, you might talk to the person beforehand, but other than that, you know, the person is going to be doing their thing and you're going to be doing your thing on the sidelines. When I do sports photography, I mainly do soccer. So they either contact me through social media, we agree on price, they send out the deposit, I go out there, I take the images that I'm going to take, I deliver those images, and they pay, and then I remove any watermark that I might have on their images. So it's fairly simple. You don't really need to talk face to face with the person, especially nowadays. A lot of it can be done digitally. But if you tend to be a more quiet and reserved person, but you still want to use your photography to make some sort of income for yourself, then sports photography could be a good way to do that. So the pros of sports photography is that, for me at least, it's fun, it is exciting, because believe it or not, as you're out there, you kind of become part of the team of the person who you are photographing. So you cheer them on, you want that team to win. So it becomes exciting in that sense. Another pro about sports photography is that it can open the doors for you to get some unique experiences, especially when you get access that other people might not be able to get access to. Maybe you get access to the field, you get to be close to the players if you work in a professional setting. You get many opportunities, you get to network, you get to talk to the coaches. Sometimes, maybe if you want, you get to talk to the players. So for that reason, to me, sports photography can be a really good gig. And another thing that I love about sports photography is that I get to be outside. I don't get to be in an enclosed environment. You know, I love being outdoors. So that is a great opportunity for you, especially if you enjoy being outdoors as well. And believe it or not, sports photography also has the potential for you to make good money. So these are all the pros that I can think of when it comes to sports photography. Now, let's talk about some of the cons. Like I said, there's nothing perfect out there. The first con that I can think of about sports photography is that sometimes you will be dependent on the weather. You know, for example, for outdoor sports, you might make a 1-hour drive to the location where the photo shoot is going to happen, and then it might start to rain, the event might get canceled, so you might have to be dealing with stuff like that. Another con is that typically, to get started and to be able to deliver good images to your clients in sports photography, you will need to have fairly pricey equipment. Those telephoto lenses are not the cheapest ones out there. You will also need a camera that is able to handle fast shutter speed, and also a camera that has really good autofocus. So these types of cameras tend to be fairly pricey, so you will need a good initial investment if you plan on getting into sports photography. Another con is that you also need to be physically able to be able to walk long distances, to be able to work under the heat of the sunlight. You will need to be able to carry expensive and heavy equipment to the location of the photo shoot. So these are all things that you will need to take into account if you decide to get into the sports photography niche. And the last con is that sometimes the action can be limited to your player, the player that you're there to photo shoot. You know, you never know if that player is gonna get injured in the first 5 minutes of the game. You never know if the player is gonna be subbed out. You don't know if the player is even going to play. So for that reason, it is important to have contracts in place. And I don't want to get much into contracts here, but you will need to have some sort of contract that indicates that you are not liable if anything was to happen to the player, because you will still be investing your time, you will still be making the drive to the location, and anything else that is out of your control, there's nothing much you can do about that. So those are the pros and cons as far as sports photography. Now, to get into the equipment investment that you should expect to make if you decide to get into sports photography, you will mainly need a good camera that has good autofocus and fast shutter speed. I recommend something like the Canon R7, which right now it ranges between $800 to maybe $1,200 for the body only. And then you also need a decent lens. If you're just starting out and you're very limited in your budget, maybe you can get something like the Tamron or a Sigma 100 or 400. If you want to go a little bit higher than that, maybe you can get a Canon 100 or 500, and that should give you enough reach, although still limited in some aspects such as low light, but that should give you enough reach to be able to cover a lot of the outdoor sports. If you're thinking of shooting something like basketball, maybe what I would recommend would be a lens that would be like a 24 to 70, maybe like a 50 millimeter, but you will be very limited with that. Preferably you want a zoom lens when shooting sports, because the action sometimes moves away, sometimes gets closer to you. So lens can range between $400 to another $1,000. So my original initial investment for equipment for sports photography will be between $1,900 to maybe $2,500, and all the way to literally there are lenses out there that cost all the way to $10,000. So at the end of the day, it will be up to you and depending on the budget that you have for your sports photography. As far as pricing or how much you expect to charge for sports photography, I've seen people typically charge $100 per player per game. So you can make contract with up to 3 players. That way, you know, you're not focusing on everyone. So you can make about $300 in an hour or an hour and a half of game time. And you can expect to deliver between 20 to maybe 30 images, sometimes even less, but it will all depend on the client and how much action that specific player gets. So that is it for sports photography. All right, I just realized that I need to speed things up, otherwise this video is gonna turn out to be a 3-hour video. So jumping on to the next one, this one is going to be real estate photography. This is another one of those niches in photography that will be better suitable for those of you who might tend to be on the quiet side. Those of you who don't enjoy working around a lot of people, you tend to enjoy working more alone, then real estate photography could be a good option for you. So with real estate photography, you will technically just do listing photo shoots. What you will do is that you will get in contact with real estate agents in your area. You will let them know that you're a photographer. They will see some of your work and then they will hire you. You will get a key or a code to access the location, and you will take up to 20 photos of the location of the property. You will edit these photos and send them back to the real estate agent. So the pros of real estate photography is that you get to work alone. So if you're a person who enjoys working alone, then this is a good photography niche for you. There's also plenty of work. I mean, there's homes selling all the time. So if you're good at taking good images and getting your name out there in the real estate world, then you will never suffer from lack of work. There are also scalable opportunities. You know, you can go from taking regular images to upselling drone shots, upselling 3D images. You can upsell video, you can do many of these other real estate related things. You also get to work in a flexible schedule. You get to choose when you have the time to go out there and photograph the property. I mean, sometimes the client, the realtor, would ask you to go in a specific time because maybe that's the only time that people who still live in the property have to be able to get out for a few hours. But for the most part, on empty homes, you will be able to choose the time that you do the photo shoot. Another good thing about real estate photography is that the weather doesn't really limit you when it comes to your photo shoot, since you will mostly be shooting indoors. So those are the good things about real estate photography. Now, jumping into the cons, one thing you gotta realize is that there's a lot of competition out there for real estate photography. Another thing that I've been seeing a lot is that agents don't really put a lot of value in good real estate images. They take their own images with their cell phone. They don't see that as an investment in many cases. So that's something that you will have to be dealing with if you decide to jump into this category. Another thing is that the equipment that you might need to use to create good work might be fairly expensive, especially if you go with tilt lenses, and those tend to be fairly pricey. But I mean, you don't need to get really expensive equipment starting out. Another con is that realtors usually expect your images literally sometimes hours after you finish the photo shoot. So you will need to get back home or to your office edit those images and send them out as soon as you can, because the deadlines tend to be very tight when it comes to real estate photography, because they have to get that house out on the market. So that's another thing that you will need to consider. It's not like, for example, doing a portrait session where sometimes you deliver those images 3-4 days later. With real estate photography, you literally go out there, take your images, and they are expected within 12 to 24 hours after the shoot. Another bad thing about real estate photography is that you will have limited creative freedom. As you might already know, most of the listing photos out there tend to look pretty much the same angles, same focal range, same style photos. So creativity is not something that you will need much if you decide to get into real estate photography. And the last couple of negative things that I can think of when it comes to real estate photography is that sometimes you will have to travel to different locations. So you have to be moving your equipment, moving your cameras, lenses, flashes. So logistics can become a problem for some people. Now, to jump into the original investment that you should expect to make as far as equipment, I would say that you can get started anywhere from $650 all the way to $3,000 if you decide to use tilt shift lenses. And we are going to talk more about tilt shift lenses when we get to the lenses section of this course. But if you're in a tight budget, you can get started with a DSLR camera, hopefully a full frame. But if you don't have the money for it, maybe you can start with the crop sensor camera. That's how I started. I wasn't producing the best images, but I will still get hired sometimes. You can start with the crop sensor, maybe 11 to 16 lens, 10 to 18. And you don't need a fast lens for this, which means that you don't really need to get those blurry backgrounds, because you actually want everything to be in focus. So those lenses that don't give you that really blurry background don't tend to be that expensive, but you will need a wide or extra wide angle lens. So that's something to keep in mind. But the more money you have, the better equipment you can get, and the quality will go up substantially higher. So that is what I would recommend as far as original investment. And as far as how much you should expect to charge, you should expect to charge about $150 to $200 per listing, which you can literally photograph a listing depending on the type of photography that you decide to do, whether it's flambient or whether it's HDR. But you can literally photograph a property within 30 to 40 minutes. So real estate photography tends to be fairly quick, and you can charge in the hundreds. So that's another photography niche that you can choose to get into. So the next one will be corporate headshots. And for corporate headshots, you still also need to talk to people. You need to know how to direct people. So you will need to be able to communicate with people as they are in your studio, or maybe you go to their office and you do the images there, but not to the extent of where you will be directing people in a wedding setting. Some of the pros of doing corporate headshots is that you will have consistent work, especially when companies go to you because you are the headshot photography name in your area. So companies will go to you, especially with types of work that have high turnover. They will have to get new headshots for new people. So there's lots of opportunity in that aspect. Also, the work is very predictable. You will just have to set your lights where you want them. You have to set your backdrops, and then you get your camera settings how you want, and you start shooting. Another thing is that you don't really need a lot of expensive equipment to do this. As far as cameras, you might need some good lighting, but at the end of the day, you will decide what's best for you depending on the lighting that you might have available. But you don't really need an expensive original investment as far as camera and lenses. And headshot photography can also give you consistent income, because you can create contracts with different businesses in your area, and you will be the photographer that they go to whenever they need new photographs for their company. So in that sense, corporate headshots could be a good niche to get into. But there are also things to consider, and these are some of the cons that I can think of when it comes to corporate headshots. The first con is that there are high expectations from the business owners. Of course, these businesses have a brand. They want their brand to be represented with high quality images. So you must be able to deliver the quality that they expect from you. Also, in instances where you have to go to their location, you will have to be carrying all your equipment. Sometimes you have to carry your lights, sometimes expensive flashes, camera systems. So that's another thing that you will have to take into consideration. You might have to take multiple trips to your car. Sometimes your office could be on the 15th floor and you have to be able to go and drop some of your equipment off and then go back down and go to your car and then go back up the building. So that's something else that you need to consider when it comes to corporate headshots. And also you will be working in a fast-paced setting. So for corporate headshots, you will get your subject, get a couple of shots, and then the next one will come along, you do the next one and the next one and the next one. That's how corporate headshots work. So that is something that you will need to consider when it comes to corporate headshot. Now, as far as equipment investment, you will need a full frame camera, which ranges, especially used or in the refurbished market, between $1,000 to $3,000. And you also need a fairly decent lens, maybe like an 85, 70 to 200, which tend to range between the $800 to $1,200. So my original investment range for corporate headshots would be between $1,600 and it could go all the way to $5,000 if you really want to use professional lighting and professional lenses. Also, one thing to keep in mind is that you will need some type of external lighting, and in order to do that, you will either need to buy off-camera flashes or off-camera lighting, and that tends to run, depending on the brand and depending on the quality that you want, between $500 to maybe $3,000. So these are all things that you will need to take into consideration for that. So as far as how much you expect to charge, you should expect to charge between $250 to $400 per individual, and you will be delivering between 2 to 4 different images. If you make contracts with different corporations or businesses in your area, you can make contracts between $1,300 to $1,600 for up to 15 people, and you will deliver between 2 to 4 shots per person. The next niche will be food photography. And again, this is another one of those niches that will be best suitable for those of you who tend to be on the shy side, on the quiet side, because you will mostly be working alone. Some of the pros is that you will not be limited by weather. You will get to work mostly on your own. You will get to network with business owners in your area, especially restaurant owners. Food photography also doesn't have a big physical demand as far as physical incapabilities that you might have. So you can just park your car, take out your camera, take a speed light or maybe a couple of flashes, and you should be good to go. So some of the cons of food photography is that you will need to know how lighting works. So you need to understand how to position your flashes. You need to understand how to change the power on your flashes, how to change the depth of field or change the aperture on your cameras and how it would affect your image. And again, we're gonna talk about all this on future videos, but you will need to know and understand how these things work. Another negative thing could be that the clients will expect extremely high quality work, because again, you will be helping them enhance their brand. And when people have their business or brand on the line, they want things to be done in a very professional, high quality way. So there will be high expectation from your clients in that aspect. You will also need to know how to edit and do it in a professional, organized way, because again, you will be representing this business's brand with your images. Therefore, you will need to deliver high quality work, and that also includes the post-processing aspect of it. And then the last con that I can think of as far as getting into the food photography niche is that sometimes you're going to be dealing with highly sensitive foods, as far as if you keep these foods out for certain amounts of time, they will tend to lose their appealing aspect to them. For example, if you have been hired to photo shoot an ice cream shop and their products, the ice cream might start to melt if you're not fast enough, and you might run into different issues. So this is something else that you will need to keep in mind if you decide to jump into the food and the restaurant business photography categories. As far as the original investment for food photography, you should expect to invest around $1,000 all the way to $3,000 for decent equipment. You will need a full frame camera more than likely. But again, a lot of these things can also be done with an APS-C sensor camera. But nowadays, you can get a full frame camera for $700. And then you probably need a 35mm lens, or maybe like a 50mm lens, which nowadays, depending on the brand that you choose and whether you want to go third party or you choose to stay with the original camera manufacturer's brand, you should expect to invest about $300 to maybe $500. But again, you can always go more expensive when it comes to photography. So at the end of the day, it will be up to you. But realistically, if you could only get one camera and one lens, you can realistically get started with $1,000 as far as camera and lens, and then you will need to invest in some lighting such as off-camera flashes. You can get one trigger and one flash for about $200. At least that's what I pay for the type of flashes that I have. So realistically, you can get started with about $1,000, and if you want to invest into more professional equipment, you can go all the way to $3,000. So that is as far as the investment, as far as how much you can charge. Since a lot of these businesses are going to be using your images for commercial purposes, you can charge a lot higher than if you were to photograph one individual client. So if I was a food photographer, I would start out at about $400 per 1 hour of actual shooting work at the restaurant. And you can go all the way up to like $700 depending on the amount of work that you are required to do, as well as the licensing that they will require from you. Because one thing to keep in mind, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know much about copyrights and stuff like that, but the images that you take, despite of taking them within a private location, those are still your images. So you will be responsible for providing the necessary licenses to these businesses in order to use your images for reproduction, in order to use your images for commercial purposes such as running ads with them, such as plastering these images on billboards and using these images on their menus, etc. So at the end of the day, you will have to figure that out with the business owner and maybe talk about it with your lawyer if you get to a point where you have your own lawyer for stuff like this. So that is all I wanted to talk about in this video about food photography. Now, the next photography niche that I wanted to talk to you about here in this video is newborn photography. This photography niche is mostly for people who enjoy working with babies. You have delicate hands, and honestly, you can make lots of money in this photography niche. I know that one specific photographer that I know here in the area, she's charging $700 per photo session, and she delivers between 10 to 15 images per session. But I mean, this is a highly sensitive type of photography, so you need to know what you're doing and you need to have the personality required to do this type of photography. You will be delivering images to clients that have high sentimental value. These are images that are going to be cherished for a long time by the parents. You will also have flexible work environments, especially if you manage to have your own studio. If you're starting out, you can either go to the location of the parents' home, or you can invite them over to your house and have a specific location at your house designed for this type of photography. Another good thing about newborn photography is that you will have the opportunity to create long-lasting relationships with the parents, because these parents are not only going to want that one session of the newborn baby, they are more than likely are going to want more images as the kid starts to grow. And if you did really good on your original photography session with them, then you will be the first photographer that comes to mind when they need any more photos of their kid. So this is a good opportunity for you to build long-lasting business relationships with the parents. Another good thing about doing newborn photography is that if you tend to be a creative person, you will have the creative freedom to work with different types of props, different types of styles of images that you would like to create for these parents. So if you're a creative person who enjoys working with kids and babies, then this is a good niche for you to get into. Now, to talk about the cons of newborn photography, the first one that comes to mind is that you will need to have patience and be of gentle nature. You don't want to be handling these kids, you know, and like just tossing them out there and start snapping a bunch of photos and blind them with your lights and flashes. And you want to be gentle. You want to be able to know how to pose these kids. You want to be able to know what type of props you want to use. You want to be able to produce high quality work, because again, these are images that are going to be cherished by the parents and grandparents and maybe even great grandparents for many years. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is that when doing this type of photography, safety should always be a priority. You don't want to post the newborn babies in a manner that could hurt them. So that's one thing that is very important. Another con is that sometimes the sessions can be fairly long, because you know, the baby might fall asleep, the baby might need changing, the baby might start to cry, and he might not stop for a while. So you need to be prepared to work for long hours. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. And the last one will be that you will need to acquire, you know, specialized lighting and props in order to be able to have the creative freedom to deliver good quality images to the parents. So those are the pros and cons of newborn photography. And as far as original equipment investment, if you don't have the budget to rent photography studio or to make your own photography studio, you can get started at your house, or maybe you can travel to your clients' homes, but you will need some type of soft flash system. You will also need to get props, and you will also need a decent camera that can capture high quality images. Also, you will also need a good quality lens. So realistically, I believe that you can get started with about $1,500, and that should cover the cameras and the lighting system and the props. But again, like anything in photography, you can go a lot higher, and you can go all the way to $10,000 if you need to. If you want to have your own studio, if you want to do all these creative things, then you will need to invest more money, of course. So that is how much you should expect to invest when it comes to newborn photography. Now, as far as how much you can charge, again, I've seen people charge $600 per hour. But at the end of the day, you know, realistically, you can get started with like $350 all the way to like $700, $800. At the end of the day, it will be up to you, and depending on how many images the clients want, and whether they want printed images and stuff like that. That is newborn photography, and I do realize that this video is turning out to be extremely long. So I think I'm going to stop here. Those are the main photography categories that you can get into as far as getting started with photography. Again, if you want to learn about the many other ones out there, there's a free PDF. Guys, I'm not going to charge you anything for that. Again, I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do, so it will be up to you. But I truly believe that you will get lots of value by receiving this free PDF. There I have other niches such as boudoir, such as macro photography, landscape photography, street photography, pet photography. There's so many other ones out there, so make sure that you download that PDF, and this is where you're going to learn about the many other different categories that are out there. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you. If you have a question of something I did not address in this video, make sure to leave those in the comment section. Also, let me see, if you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like me to make, or something else that you would like me to include in this course, also feel free to leave that down there in the comment section of this video as well. If you found this video to be valuable, make sure to give this video a like and share this video with any other upcoming photographers out there. If you want to learn more and you want to be notified every time I upload one of these videos, feel free to subscribe to this channel and ring the little bell. That way you get a notification every time I upload a new video here on this channel. So that is it. That is the end of video number 1, choosing the right niche. I hope that the next ones are not gonna be this long, because this video literally, you know, I think it's almost like at an hour now. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got lots of value from it, and stay tuned for the next one. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.